Good afternoon, everyone. We are Group 4, and my group members are Ricky Samwaro, Tanya Budu, and Kyla Kiabo. So my group was tasked to explain the phosphorus cycle and to look at some other important details related to this cycle. So phosphorus is one of the most important minerals for all organisms. Now we just look at some of the roles in which phosphorus plays. So the phosphorus-containing compounds, phosphate and adenosine triphosphate, which is ATP, are important in the energy transfer reactions at the cellular level. It is a limiting factor in aquatic ecosystems. The amount of available phosphate influences the productivity of the ecosystem. Phosphorus is important to vertebrates in the body, and approximately 80% of phosphorus is present in the teeth and bones. Now we go into look at the phosphorus cycle. So as we can see here on the slide, the phosphorus cycle is a biogeochemical cycle, and it occurs mainly in 3 of the major atmosphere, which is the lithosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere. Most phosphorus in nature exists in the form of phosphate ions. So the major movements of the phosphorus cycle are on terrestrial systems, phosphorus-containing rocks and minerals are subjected to chemical weathering. Then number 2, plants consume inorganic phosphate from the soil. 3, inorganic phosphorus in the soil is made available to plant life forms. And 4, phosphorus in the soil can end up in the waterways due to runoffs. Now I'll go into depth with this. So the phosphorus cycle is different from other biogeochemical cycles because it does not have a gaseous phase. Phosphorus is transported in the aqueous form, which is dissolved in water. Firstly, we'll be looking at the phosphorus cycle in terrestrial environments. So as we should know, or if we don't, the largest reservoir of phosphorus is in sedimentary rocks, where the cycle begins as seen in the picture. Yes. When it rains, phosphates are removed from the rocks through the process of weathering and find their way into both soil and water. Phosphates usually move to water by the process of erosion. By the process of weathering and erosion, phosphates enter the river and streams, which transport them to the ocean. As seen here in the picture, this is not the only way phosphates enter the ocean. The extraction of phosphates from mines and the use of fertilizers for agricultural purposes lead to phosphate runoff into the rivers and streams. So once in the ocean, the phosphates accumulates on continental shelves in the form of insoluble deposits, which are exposed on land after millions of years. Then the phosphates are taken up by the plants from the soil. These ions move from plants to animals when the plants are eaten by herbivores, and when carnivores feed on the herbivores, basically where animals feed on other animals that eat on the plants. The phosphate that is absorbed by animal tissues through consumption is eventually returned to the soil when animals get rid of waste products of metabolism. Phosphate is also returned to the environment when bacterial decomposition of organic matters take place. Now we look at the phosphorus cycle in aquatic ecosystems or aquatic environments. So the same thing happens in aquatic ecosystem basically. The deep ocean sediments are important phosphorus sinks because they contain phosphorus. Phosphorus usually binds to soil particles and enter waterways through sediment runoff. Phosphates are washed into waterways and utilized by vegetation and algae. These phosphates may come from fertilizer runoff, sewage discharge, natural deposits, and industrial waste. Phosphates tend to settle on the bottom of ocean and lakes and other water bodies. When these sediments are stirred up, phosphates then re-enter the phosphate cycle. So this is basically the rundown of the steps involved in the phosphate cycle. So when all of these steps are finished, the cycle just continues to go on and on. This is why it's called a cycle. Phosphate cycle is basically one of the slowest cycles to occur because of the way in which phosphates are found. So now I'll hand you over to my colleague.
Forms of phosphorus existence in nature. This vital mineral is not found uncombined in nature, however, it is found widely in sedimentary rocks. Phosphorus exists in two major forms, white phosphorus and red phosphorus, but because it is highly reactive, it is never found as a free element on the earth. As you can see in the picture, it shows a white phosphorus and red phosphorus. White phosphorus is very explosive, and the phosphorus burns in the air and it can cause severe burn to the skin or eye if it gets contact. As for red phosphorus, it is not considered toxic, but the contamination with yellow phosphorus may cause coughing, bronchitis, or possible liver or kidney damages. The phosphate content in sedimentary rocks varies greatly from 4% to 20% phosphorus pentoxide. These phosphate-rich sedimentary rocks forms in the shallow ocean mainly due to the bacterial activity, but only when several conditions are met. Their formation is pretty rare. Bacteria feeds off nutrients from the organic matter and the cold of welling water and releases the phosphorus elements from the organic matter. Other bacteria crystallizes mud-sized crystals of that phosphate. This is both a combination of physical and biological processes. Now I'll say about the microbiological importance of phosphorus. Phosphorus is a major element that enables many different organisms to perform many different vital functions that enable life. It involves in several key plant functions including energy transfer, photosynthesis, transformation of sugar and starches, nutrients movement within plants, and the transfer of genetic characteristics from one generation to the next. Deficiency of phosphorus in the soil severely affects the plant metabolism and in turn their yields. Due to many factors, it remains unavailable to plants despite its abundance in the soil. Such phosphate solubilizing microorganisms convert unavailable forms of phosphorus into one that is easily assimilated by plants and promotes the growth of plants, leading them to more yields.
Now I'll be looking at the last three importances. So phosphorus is important for the growth of microbes. So according to studies, the concentration of phosphorus needed to stimulate growth of microbes is very low. Phosphorus is a limiting factor of microbial productivity. Little phosphorus can limit the growth of microbes, while a sufficient amount can significantly increase the growth. While they are very beneficial, excess quantity is a pollutant in aquatic ecosystems. Excess phosphorus leads to eutrophication and stimulate excess growth of algae and plankton. There's a severe implication of the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. Now we'll be looking at the third, which is phosphorus is important for the formation of cell membranes. The plasma membrane or cytoplasmic membrane is composed of phospholipid bilayer. So the phospholipid bilayer is made up of phosphorus, as the name suggests. And this layer has a general function of a cell membrane, such as acting as a permeable barrier for most molecules and serving as a location for transport of molecules into the cell. Finally, phosphorus is important for the formation of ATP. Some microbes obtain energy from oxidation of organic compounds. Carbohydrates are commonly oxidized compounds. Biologic oxidation of these organic compounds by bacteria results in the synthesis of ATP as a chemical energy source. ATP is made by the synthesis of ADP and phosphate through cellular respiration. ATP is the main source of energy, which is used in many metabolic processes. Now, I'll hand you over to my colleague.
Ways in which humans affect the phosphorus cycle. Cutting down of tropical rainforests. Cutting down of trees and other vegetation can cause climate change and dissatisfactions to soil, which causes soil erosion. The phosphorus cycle is greatly affected due to deforestation because when trees are removed, the soil levels of phosphorus are diminished greatly, and this nutrient is vital for plant growth. Second one, mining of calcium phosphate. The phosphate is obtained through mining of certain phosphate called apatite. Plants may not be able to utilize all the phosphate fertilizers applied. As a consequence, much of it is farmed from the land through water runoff. Third one, commercial synthetic fertilizers. Agricultural runoff resulting in large quantities of phosphate entering aquatic systems, causing eutrophication and cultivation of leguminous crops. Transporting fertilizers, animal feeds, agricultural crops, and other products alters to the global phosphorus cycle, causing phosphorus to accumulate in the soil, increasing phosphorus levels. The soil then elevates the potential of phosphorus runoff to the aquatic ecosystem. I will now hand you over to my colleague.
So we're at the end of our presentation, and in conclusion, see that phosphorus is important for the production of DNA, RNA, ATP, and the development of strong bones and teeth. The phosphorus cycle is a sedimentary biogeochemical cycle. Phosphorus is found mainly in sedimentary rocks where weathering takes place and the phosphorus enters the soil and the water. When the phosphorus accumulates, they are deposited after millions of years in the insoluble deposits. The phosphate is then taken up by the plants and passed to animals when they are consumed. The phosphate then returns to the soil when bacteria decomposes organic matter or when it is passed out in the metabolic processes by animals. Phosphorus are also important for microbes because they promote growth, formation of the cell membrane, and the production of ATP. Human activities such as deforestation, use of synthetic fertilizers, and the mining of calcium phosphate affects the phosphate cycle. So this is basically the end, and this is some of the sources we use to gather our information. Thank you for listening. Any questions?